And welcome again. For the people that doesn't know me, yeah, I am Alessandro Pepe. I'm the owner of Rimessa Roscioli and one of the creators with Lindsay Gabbard and all our team of the Roscioli Wine Club. And you are the privileged people that are part of the Collectors and the Legend Club, which is a super exclusive part of the wine club. Let me explain exactly how does it work, the Collector Club. The Collector Club is about speaking with a winemaker. I started to actually deal with them like 10, 15 years ago. Mainly for the restaurant, because I realized that a bottle that is settled down in the cellar of the winery is a completely different experience than a bottle that has been traveling all around from one restaurant to another. So it's easy to buy wines in auctions, but you never know where these wines actually were kept all time long. But also what I've actually noticed that when you don't move the bottle in the first 5, 6, 7, 8 years from the producer, there is something like magic. And trust me, you can speak with any sommelier, with Hugh Johnson or Jensen Robinson, they will always tell you this, that when they go directly to a winery and they taste a bottle that has got maybe 6, 7, 8, 10 years, it's a completely different experience than opening that bottle in a restaurant. So I want to tell you that like 90% of the bottles actually I'm presenting of this selection, the 12 bottles plus the 3 for the only reds, are coming directly from the cellar, and they shipped it last 2 weeks. So what I'm talking about is this bottle that is for 2014, that is actually 6 plus 2, 8 years old. It's coming directly from France, and it arrived, I think, less than a week ago. At the moment, we are in October 12th. The same thing I would say for this Amarone, for example, the Villa Spina, the Paitin. This is such lucky, incredible experience because Paitin, he still has, this is actually his last portion of Special Riserva Barbaresco 2007. Just is to understand what's going on, because sometimes people say, oh, but I found that bottle to a different price. I'm like, yeah, but where does that bottle come from? Okay, so you don't know where that bottle come from, who kept it. It's not just a matter of selection. I will repeat over and over that being part of the wine club gives you a lot of privilege, which wine is one of them, especially for the collector of the legend. If you will be in Rome, you have the possibility to have a free tasting of one of our collectors and legend tasting, which is 17 wines paired with more than 10 plates of food. And you can have a free visit on wineries, and we just actually bought a little house in Etna, so you can have also the privilege to stay there for free. It's in the middle of the vineyard, and to have a private tasting with a winemaker. There is an extra thing that for our American friends that lives in the East Coast, an extra surprise, but I cannot tell you now because it's not 100% sure. But from our friends from the East Coast of US, that they're going to have an incredible privilege if they are part of our wine club. So stay with us. And let's start from France. We are here in Vallée de la Marne, on the southeast part of Reims. That's how you pronounce it properly if you want to be a fancy French guy. And we're talking about 60% or 60%. 70% of Meunier, and then there is a bit of a Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Pinot Meunier is one of the most difficult grape varieties in Champagne, but can give you one of the most interesting Champagne because it's a grape variety that's a bit more rustic. It calls Meunier because it means mugnaio, is the guy that works, is like the bakery guy, because the grape variety, when it comes in October, is covered with a slightly like white surface. So it looks like flour. And Meunier, if it's not well done, it's kind of a bit rustic. It has been used usually to blend it, to give a bit of a structure to other wines. And I remember, for example, La Closerie was one of the greatest. It's still maybe not as good as before. La Closerie is another beautiful Pinot Meunier, and I think that Franck Pascal is possibly at the moment one of the best Pinot Meunier producer. And you will actually find the wine with structure and an elegance at the same time, with a nice crispy finish. It's coming from typical Vallée de la Marne soil with the chalk, so they give to the salty flavor to the wine. And this is a beautiful champagne that can go with anything, literally with anything. It's a complex wine, so you can have it with an aperitif, even with as long as you don't match it with sweet stuff or like dessert or something that is too acidic, like lemon sauce and stuff, or barbecue sauce or something too sweet. Because we're talking about a wine that is a strongly organic, biodynamic. Biodynamic in Champagne means extremely organic. In Champagne is not easy because you're talking about a place that is cold with a lot of humidity, a lot of diseases. So I'm talking about Franck Pascal, Marguet, and a few others that in my opinion are able to do proper biodynamic without adding extra sulfates in the wine, so no headache. after the day after when you drink the entire bottle, and beautiful, beautiful opportunity to get in touch with what is called the récoltant manipulant, so small producer of champagne. Then we're going to move to another wine that is kind of an outsider, I would say. This is Riccardo from La Staffa, Riccardo Baldi. It's a little big wine. I call it the Montrachet of central Italy. It's called the Selva di Sotto. Why this wine is so unique? Because he makes only 700 bottles every 3 years. So you should consider yourself lucky to have a bottle of wine that technically genetics doesn't exist. You can imagine 300, 700 years is less than 250 bottles per year, and he only choose the right vintage. And this is a 13.5 degrees in alcohol. It's a Verdicchio dei Castelli di Jesi, which means that we are in center southeast of Rome, on the other side of the sea, so the Adriatico. Jesi, you have a video of Riccardo. He's a really nice guy. He's an incredible connoisseur of the soil, of the villages, and this wine is, in my opinion, is kind of an incredible, powerful elegance. It might remind you like a slightly bitter Burgundy Chardonnay. So let it sit on the glass. So don't drink it too cold. I would say like around 10 degrees, which means 48. I guess. I don't know how to translate in Fahrenheit. And this is, my opinion, goes with complex food dishes. Beautiful, beautiful, unique bottle. If you let it sit down in the cellar for another couple of years, you're not going to make any damage. Actually, it's going to give you better and better. Now, we're going to go to our friend Rocca Giovanni, and this is another bottle that comes from an incredible vintage, 2013. I often said how 13, in my opinion, is a vintage that is astonishing, and in my opinion is better than 2010, better than the super overrated 2009, which is, I call it the American vintage, and it was too warm in my opinion. A lot of Barolo had a lot of high rates, but now the wines are going a bit down. Why 13 is actually passing through, and which is getting better. I think it's better even than 15 and 16 because it was a cold climate, but not too cold. So you had a bit of a rain, but at the end you had sun during the harvest. And we're talking about typical tradition on Monforte d'Alba. Monforte d'Alba has a mixture of blue marl soil and clay soil, and you will have wines that are strongly truffly. They have like the essence of the rustic and on the same time elegant Barolo, comparing to La Morra where the wine is slightly more round. This is a truffle wine. So if you find any black truffle, idea will be have some white truffle. Impossible to find nowadays. Maybe you have to wait another couple of months to have proper truffle, maybe 1 month. But again, it's totally that. That's the pairing. Again, this wine comes directly from the winery, 2013, set for 9 years in the cellar. And now we're going to go to our Gevrey Chambertain, les Champeaux. Le Bouree. We are talking about a small négociant from the area of France, Burgundy in France. And you know what's the game, no? They used to say, kind of assess this joke coming from Brillat-Savarin. You know, in order to describe Chambertain, Brillat-Savarin used to say, I don't remember the place, I don't even remember the lady, but the wine, damn it, was a Chambertain. So how Chambertain used to be such an important type of wine, and it's actually ruled the planet in the concept of Pinot Noir. So if you have Pinot Noir all over the world, it is because of this village. It's divided in 7 Grand Cru and other 7 Grand Cru, sorry, and I made a mistake, 18 Premier Cru, I think. And then you have a lot of village, okay? So we have Le Champeaux is actually a Premier Cru that stays just on the top of Chambertain and on the west side. And it's actually getting some of the hint of Moët Saint-Denis and some of the structure of Chambertain. Chambertain usually means power. If we have to divide the first 5 big villages of Côte de Nuit, we would say that on Chambertain you find power. On Moët Saint-Denis you will find minerality. On Chambol-Muisemille you find silkiness. On Clos du Vougeot you find a kind of a mixture of all the Burgundy style. And on Romanée Saint-Vivant you will find powerful and elegance at the same time. And with Saint Georges you get more on the iron, metallic and tannic flavor. So we are here on Chambertain, or the most famous. You have to remember that the oldest vineyard in the world comes from here, Chambertain-Clos de Betz. which was actually designed by monks and possibly even by some latest Roman family in the year 632. And actually, this is a beautiful example of how, tradition and the fact that you don't change borders and things, and that the amount of wine produced there is the same of 1,400 years ago. Because usually what happens in wine production, that a region becomes famous, and they start to enlarge the border. So that's why Burgundy is such a reference for every sommelier in the world. So we used to go to Burgundy to have our epiphany about wine, because there we understand what does it mean, the concept of terroir, which is impossible to translate. It's not impossible to translate, but terroir is the link between a man, human, or a woman, a human being, a soil, and a climate, and a tradition. Beautiful type of wine. Fortini was a cold climate vintage, beautiful vintage considered by a lot of producers. Again, European vintage, I would say, comparing to the 15. From the same producer, and we go to Puligny Montrachet, and Puligny Montrachet from a warmer vintage, this 2015. Montrachet, this actually ruled the planet in terms of Pinot Noir. This ruled the planet in terms of Chardonnay. So when you drink your oaky Chardonnay from Napa Valley, from Silver Oak to other ones and so on, you have to understand that this is the grandmother of every white wine in the world. I call it in a feminine way because to me is the elegance and the power at the same time. I consider women really strong, but at the same time elegant. So I would say the Puligny Montrachet is a super feminine type of wine. I like when it's the buttery flavor is perfectly matching with the smoky flavor. It's not too buttery there, and it's a village that, in my opinion, has the value of a Premier Cru, and this is a wine that goes with absolutely noble fish. You need to have an important noble fish to pair it with. Oh, about this one here, I would say that you can pair it with some tuna fish or some tartare. Oh, it will be nice if you want to make a little comparison, is actually to compare these two. Because this guy, Podere Fortuni, and is coming from the northern part of Tuscany, he bought some of the plants from Romane Conti, which is the most expensive wine in the world. And it's a Pinot Noir, again in Burgundy. Romane Saint-Vivant is actually is the village where Romane Conti comes from. And he wanted to recreate his Burgundian wine. And to me, was kind of a snobbish doing this thing, but when he let me try the 2009, I was actually quite impressed. You know how suspicious and snobbish I am against the Pinot Noir outside of Burgundy and maybe Loire Valley. I usually hate Pinot Noir from Italy. I can stand a bit Pinot Noir from Oregon, some from Tasmania, but Napa Valley to me it's not the right place for Pinot Noir, for example. I don't like when Pinot Noir is too flat, too fruity. I like when it's actually get this, hint of like minerality. And I would say Podere Fortuni, especially with the age, was a bit too oaky when I tried this wine like 5-6 years ago. Now to me it's perfectly elegant. So you have a 13 years old wine coming directly from one, and great experience. Would be nice to do it in a blind taste one with the other. And Amarone. I always talk about Amarone in a bad way in my tasting. I don't like the idea that especially a lot of our North European friends are completely corrupted by some importer, exporter that started to fulfill the market, especially in Sweden and Norway, with this overly fruity and sweet type of Amarone, probably matching perfectly with some cold winter in the north of Norway, getting an Amarone. But on the other side, in my opinion, that idea of Amarone was come from the trend of the 90s. Do you remember the 90s were all bold, a lot of fruit, a lot of oak? And to me, Amarone, you have to perceive Amarone as an elegant port wine or a less alcoholic port wine. So I like when Amarone gets its best when it's at least 10-15 years old. This is exactly 15 years old, 2007, Amarone Classo della Valpolicella, Villa Spinosa, again aged in the cellar of the winery, delivered for the wine club 10 days ago. Trust me, what we are doing with winery, I don't think anyone has the power like Rossoli to convince a winemaker to keep for you 100, 120 bottles, 7, 8, 10 years, and sell it to you to a reasonable price after like 10 years and keep it there for them. Of course, we give some money in advance and we risk a bit because if it's not for the collector, we use it for our wine cellar, but it's an incredible opportunity. On the other side, you know how much I love Luca Pasquero, the wonder boy of the Langhe area. He's like 32, 33 years old guy coming from a family that is producing wine in the same place for more than 450 years. Trust me, in Langhe, 450 years is a lot. It might not be a lot if you go to Contucci, Montepulciano, or if you go in the Chianti area, you have middle-aged castles like Castello Ricasoli, like Antinori. They are maybe 1,000 years old, or even if you go in southern part of Italy. But Langhe is a kind of a new region in terms of Nebbiolo. No? The Nebbiolo has been produced there for 100 years, but finding family that has been staying there in the same place is not easy. And also it's beautiful how the family is actually working together. It's a 3 generation. The grandfather passed away actually a few months ago, but I remember that I was talking with the grandmother, the grandfather, the uncle, the father, and the son, and they were all somehow on the same stage, on the same step, which is not easy. Usually there are conflicts in family. And the problem when you have conflict in family, especially between father and son or mother and son or whatever, it's a problem because wine is about tradition. Wine is a kind of a conservative. I'm progressive, but when it comes to wine, you have to be somehow conservative. You have to, change things slowly. And the way he's interacting with his father, and the way how this wine is getting better and better without losing the soul of the wine, it's absolutely incredible. Luca Pasquero, he's an intellectual. It's nice because sometimes he shares with me like messages on WhatsApp, like. He's such a romantic guy, and his girlfriend, we're here on the full moon, and I thought to give you this Ich met Iranian poetry from the 13th century. So, and I don't know, it's nice when he matched wine with some quotes and stuff. When we talk about Barbaresco, this is actually the Sori Paitin, which is a beautiful cru. Typical of the Blue Mar, which is the noble soil of Barbaresco and the southeast part of Barolo, gives you wine that are incredibly austere. How this wine is able to be powerful and elegant at the same time. You need to have some Parmigiano with it, especially if you are trained with Napa Valley wines. This wine's going to be slightly harsh on the first sip, but then with a bit of a Parmigiano, you're going to fall in love and you're going to stop drinking Napa Valley. It's going to be a rehab for you. An incredible wine, 2007, warm vintage, but perfect to drink it now, but it can stay in the bottle another few years, I would say. And Super Tuscan, I Mandorli, Sangiovese. It's not a Super Tuscan technically because this is 100% Sangiovese, but it's coming from the Bolgheri area, which is an area that I usually don't like to spend a lot of time because I don't like the idea of the Super Tuscan. You know that, Cabernet that is trying to imitate Napa, that is trying to imitate Bordeaux, wines made for tourists. I'm talking about, Solaia and Ornellaia and all those wines. Some of the vintages are beautiful, I'm not saying, but value per price, unless some vintages of Ornellaia and Sassicaia, I would not say that they are, incredible wines. So I actually got in touch with this small winery. They had a special Riserva Sangiovese 2012, 10 years in the bottle, and with a bit of oak, but perfectly digested by the wine. It's an incredible expression of a Mediterranean Sangiovese, elegant and earthy at the same time. Have it with some wild boar if you find it. Okay, this is not exactly the bottle that you're going to have because you're going to have the special Riserva Alberello, but I don't have it here with me because he had only few. He gave me only 65 one, and you are 65 members, and so I couldn't have a bottle because it's on the shipping company now. SRC probably is one of the most interesting Etna wine we tried in the last 5-6 years. And it's purest type of Etna, volcanic soil. And the Alberello, which is the freestanding bush, is a really small production of 600 bottles made every year. And he gave us a part of his private selection of 2014, 16, and 17. So you're going to be really lucky. I know you're going to have one of these vintages. I don't know exactly which one because he didn't have enough. We had to do 24, 24, and 24. And there are all of them beautiful vintage. 17 will be slightly more warm, 14 colder, 15 something in between. We're talking about a wine that stays 5, 6, 8 years in the cellar, and you're going to find a wine that gets all on the tertial aromas, all on the spices, all on the smoky flavor. And Le Sorelle Conti. And you know how much I love this winery, and the video that I will connected to this wine, explain more than anything I can say. 3 daughters that lost their incredible father when he was quite young. He was like 60, 62 years old. And he was an incredible winemaker that was absolutely impossible to deal with commercial issues. He used to make a lot of beautiful wines. He didn't know how to sell them. Coming from an area that has been a bit forgotten, northern part of Piedmont, we are not so far away from the Barolo area. But when Barolo started to develop, especially from 1936 to 1938, as far as I remember, they had 3 continuous years of a hailstorm that destroyed 90% of the vineyard. And after that, you had industrialization, people leaving the countryside, going to factories. One of them was Fiat, for example. And so they moved from 5,000 hectares of vineyard planted from Gattinara to Boca to less than 50. You can imagine what does that mean. Now people are slightly going back, and Le Sorelle Conti, the Conti family has been there for a long while. They have a beautiful castle where they produce wine. But the interesting story is that the 3 sisters actually suddenly had to deal with the winery, and they didn't know anything about it because they were not part of the business. Their father were doing it. At the beginning, they struggled, but then they started to work together. They started to taste the barrels, and was a way also to get in touch a bit with the father, I think. I don't want to get too much in an Oedipic issue. One of the sisters was away, she came back, and it was about, okay, we need to save this memory. And the Conti wine are completely, you can feel the Nebbiolo touch, but they're more elegant. I wouldn't say feminine again, but yes, they are. Comparing to a Barbaresco, it would be nice actually to do this comparison, if you want to open these 2 bottles one after the other. An incredible type of wine that I would go for, again, with a bit of a truffle if you want. This is 2005, so again, it's coming directly from the winery. It's coming directly aged for more than 10 years in barrels and 5 years in the bottle. So try to like it, because it's a wine that is not easy to find. Last thing, there is one bottle that is missing, which is Rubino, because we shipped directly from the winery to our delivery company, and he only had 60 bottles, so I don't even have a bottle to have here for the wine for our restaurant, where all these bottles will be available on the wine list for the restaurant. So it's a Rubino 2000. Palazzola is Stefano Grilli. He's a winemaker from Umbria, and Narni. And it's a beautiful plateau surrounded by a beautiful amphitheater. Narni, the Narnia Chronicles actually come from Narni. Not a lot of people knows it, but the movie and the book come from this little place, a village, mythological place in Umbria. And it's not a place really famous for wine. There is a bit of a Ciliagiolo di Narni, but winemakers, I don't think there are a lot of wine. So he's like last of the Mohican, producing wine in an area that is not really famous. And he started to plant some Cabernet in the 80s. You know that I don't like, Cabernet style of wine in Italy, but when it comes to places like that are not the usual Super Tuscan, and especially having a wine that is 22 years old, you will find this wine that's a bit more musty than usual Cabernet, with a nice refreshing acidity after 22 years, coming directly from the cellar, aged by Stefano Grilli just for us. A beautiful wine that you should go with some fillet steak, I would say, or some game, or again with something with truffle. Thank you.